Ooh. Ooh, that was good. Okay. Hello. Welcome to the Dyslexinomicon. My name is Tori. I love stories, and it takes me a while to read them because I'm dyslexic. Today we're going to be talking about A Lesson in Vengeance by Victoria Lee. We're going to talk about the swings and hits, the swings and misses, whether or not I would recommend it being worth your time as a dyslexic reader or as a non-dyslexic reader, whatever. This is a really interesting book. This book was quite fascinating to read. I listened to it on audiobook, and I read it for a book club that I do with my sister. This was actually our first book of our book club. And on one hand, it was nice to have something fairly short to just kind of bust through. We read it, I think we did like 3 weeks-ish, and we read the whole thing together, well, separately, and then we talked about it once a week, like a book club. Yeah, I did not like this book. I would not have finished it if I hadn't been reading it for the book club. Tess, my sister, wouldn't have either. So not great, but not great in very interesting ways. And I wouldn't write this author off in the future. So let's get into it. So what's this book about? A Lesson in Vengeance is dark academia. This was the first dark academia I've read. It's YA also. One booktuber that I really enjoy, she's not technically a booktuber, but Plant-Based Bride, Elizabeth Turn, her recommendation is why I read this book. I've read other books that she's recommended before, and I really like her, generally her taste in fiction. This one wasn't really a hit for me, as clearly as discussed just now, but one thing that she has mentioned before is that she is in her 30s, I'm in my 30s, and it might just be that I am too old for YA now. YA just might not really speak to me anymore because I am not a young adult. I am thoroughly an adult. I am 31. So maybe I'm just not this target audience. I'm not this target audience, but maybe it's just not hitting well because of that. Some of the writing style, some of the story elements. I might have really loved this and things wouldn't have bugged me the way that they did now because I'm not who they were writing for. It's dark academia, it's YA, it takes place in an all-girls school in like, I'm sure they said where it was, but I don't remember. But I imagined it being in like Massachusetts or Maine or like something up in New England, like a New England-y all-girls school. They're very rich girls that go to this school. It's very like well-to-do, money, society kind of thing. And there are some really fun story elements. So this school has a history based in the like Salem witch trials, witches, and there may or may not be a curse, and the main character very much believes in witchcraft and sort of considers herself a witch. There is definitely an element, a huge element in this story about whether or not witchcraft is real. And I really like that question in a story, so I was really happy to see that. This character also uses tarot cards. I love tarot cards. I got very into them a little bit ago, and that's really fun. And the cards that the author chose to use in their readings were very interesting and provided intrigue and kind of built on the story question or played into the story question without giving things away if you knew all about tarot cards. So I really, really liked that. I thought that they used that as a mechanism in their story really well, which I love to see. I read another book recently that also used tarot cards, and I actually like the way Victoria Lee used them better. And I thought that they had a better understanding of how tarot cards work. And the whole question of is witchcraft real or is it not? Is magic real or is it not? Is very fun. I enjoyed it for the first maybe third of the book, maybe the first half of the book. And then around the midpoint is when I stopped enjoying the way that question was being handled. But we'll go to that in misses. So, oh my goodness, I just realized, sorry. I just realized that I wasn't really talking about what this story is about. So what's the story about? Let's go back. What is A Lesson in Vengeance about? It's about a girl named Felicity who is at this all-girls school in like a New Englandy type place. Again, the other may have said where this is and I forgot. Sorry. But it's in that kind of upstate area. I think Massachusetts, but I might just be projecting that onto the story because it's where I thought it was. The main character the year before had a very hard thing happen, a hard loss happen, and that is revealed very early on. That's part of kind of the setup. And it's about when a new girl comes to the school and the main character, because of this new girl being there, kind of is set down this path of trying to figure out if witchcraft is real, if it is not, if she's being haunted, if she is not, and by who, if so. And it just kind of sets her spinning on trying to kind of uncover what happened last year and kind of get past it and get past any kind of supernatural repercussions of her actions the year before. It's also a sapphic romance. This is the first sapphic romance I've read too, which was very, very fun to read. I really enjoyed that element of it. I didn't enjoy this relationship, but that is separate from the fact that it's two ladies, two girls really, because they're underage, so they're children. But yeah, okay, let's go into, that's the setup. Let's go into swing and a hit. So what are the things that worked really well? I was really excited to read Dark Academia because I had not before. We started reading this in the month of October, so what better time to read something a little spooky. I was really excited about the witches, really excited when tarot was brought into it, loved that. There was a big question of like, did they like summon a devil or a demon or something the year before, or did they not? So that's a fun question too to kind of, you know, struggle with, to look into. A lot of good ideas, really good setting, I thought. It took me a while to figure out if like the new girl who comes into the story, her name's Ellis, whether or not she was like the new love interest for our main character. I couldn't quite pick up on that right away, which I'm very okay with. I like when things aren't fully telegraphed. I like when you kind of have to just read and figure it out. And I think that life is a little windy. I don't like it when like the new character walks in and you're like, well, clearly they're the love interest, and then they're the love interest, and then that's just it, they're the love interest. I like a little more like, what's up with you? What's your deal? And I think the author did a really good job with that because the new character has a huge pull, she's kind of a celebrity, on all the other girls in this house, in this little dorm house that she lives in. And that was really fun, and she's kind of like rolling her eyes at all the girls who want to be like her and follow her trends and blah blah blah, which was a little annoying that she was so harsh on her classmates, but did make it interesting when then you see her kind of being intrigued by her too. There's also a point in the story where you see her kind of falling under the spell as well and kind of leaning more towards the like, we're too cool for cell phones thing that the other kids did, but not seeing that in herself, which I thought was a really authentic thing, that she would mock someone for being too cool for a cell phone, but then decide she's too cool for a computer and she's gonna write everything on a typewriter, but not ever think like, hey, that's as dumb as what I thought the other people were dumb for. I thought that was interesting. I thought that was one of the really well done moments of being like, oh, she's an unreliable narrator. She doesn't see what she's doing. And we never do. And it's very closely related to like how big a crush she has on this person, or just the way she feels about that person in general, whether it's a crush or whether it's friendship or whatever. And I thought that was very interesting. I really liked that. It was a good twist. And it came at a part where I wasn't really enjoying the book, but I still really thought that was done well. So I think that's even more of a testament to it being done well. A huge, like the best thing this book did is the non-binary character in this book was done so well because it was done so casually. The author is themselves non-binary. I don't think that's how that sentence should be said, but the author is non-binary, and I think you can see it really, really in a great way in how this character is portrayed, because this character is just non-binary, and they are not, that doesn't change their personality. That doesn't really play into, they don't really talk about how this person presents as far as presenting feminine or masculine or you know, however they choose to present. They don't talk about that. There is never any mention of what gender was assigned at birth for this character. And I, as a cisgendered woman, I think I probably would have included that. And I don't think that's the right choice. I think that the way that Victoria Lee did it is the best choice of just not ever referencing it, because it doesn't matter, because they are they, and that's what they are. And so why do we need to know what someone thought they were before? This is who they are, and they're presented as a whole character. It is mentioned that their parents really hate that they're non-binary, but their parents they have two moms. And this might be just my ignorance showing, but I found it odd that two moms would have trouble with having a non-binary child. And the way that it was written was very like, because they're part of high Southern society, they hate it. That didn't ring true for me, especially because if they are part of high Southern society, they probably had to carve out their own life and their own respect in the community being two women who are together. And I feel like that would lend itself to them being able to accept their children in however they turn out to be. I'm not at all saying that that was written badly or that it shouldn't have been written that way. I'm not saying it shouldn't have been written that way or the author did a bad job with that part of the story. Maybe this is me learning more about lives that I have not experienced myself. I would love to hear from any of you if you have experienced something like this, or if that rings true for you. Yeah, does that ring true for you? that family dynamic would be in place. It just struck me as odd. I think it would make more sense if there were gay parents who grew up in a community that fully accepted them, and then they had a trans or non-binary child, and they were like, whoa, we don't, there's only so much that we're okay with, and we're not okay with that. But having parents who were in like polite society or high society in the South, who would have faced discrimination already themselves because of their sexuality, their presentation, that kind of thing, their identity in that way, it's just odd to me that they would then be like, because I'm pretty sure in the book they like disowned, they like do not talk to their non-binary child, which is just crazy. It's just crazy to me, and it might not be crazy. I shouldn't say it's crazy. I should say it struck me as odd and I didn't understand. But that might just be me not understanding. I know I'm repeating and rambling right now, but I want to be very clear that this is something that I didn't understand and didn't make sense to me, but I just might not understand. It might be completely normal and might ring true for a lot of people who have actually had experience with these types of relationships. So please let me know if you have had experience with this type of relationship and you're like, yeah, that does sound right. That does ring true for me. Please enlighten me, because I would love to know. Okay, any other swings and hits? That was the biggest one. A really great character who is non-binary And even though they do mention that their parents are not happy that they are non-binary, it doesn't seem, their parents are painted as kind of bad no matter what, like bad in lots of other ways. So them being non-binary was never the central issue, and they seem very well adjusted. They're written as a very well adjusted, happy character. It did not ruin their life. It did not, it is not the driving force of conflict or sadness in the story, which I know is very frequently how someone who is different than cisgendered heteronormative, they're often portrayed as that's the thing that drives the conflict in their life, that's the thing that drives sadness in their life, that's the thing that drives loneliness in their life, and that is not in any way how this is portrayed. So that was great. I thought that was great. So those are the big swings and hits. There are a lot of swings and misses for me with this book. A lot of them are superficial, were just things I didn't enjoy, or were like writing style things. I'm very particular about writing style, so I don't think it means that that person's not a good writer. I'm picky. But there are some really big swings and misses that I find so much more sad and discouraging, I guess. Disappointing. I'm not mad, I'm disappointed. Disappointing because of how great a swing and a hit that non-binary character is. And I'm so sad about it because I have non-binary, trans. In the book they use trans and non-binary interchangeably. I've not heard them used interchangeably, but that might just again be me not having known that they are. I would love to be able to give this book to the kids that I know that are in my life who are trans, non-binary, genderqueer. I would love to be able to give them this book and be like, here, this is a book that is fun and has a character. You are represented in this book and represented so well, and you're a well-adjusted person. They show a well-adjusted person as a representation of someone who identifies similarly to you or as you do. And I would love to be able to give them this, but there are some very common, very serious mental health issues that are portrayed so badly, and at times cruelly. And I wouldn't want to give them this book. I wouldn't want to give any child this book because I wouldn't want them, because if they are dealing with any of those issues, it's a slap in the face in such a mean way. And if they're not dealing with those issues and their friends are, I wouldn't want to give this, or even if their friends are, if they don't know their friends are, if they're not dealing with this issue, I don't want this to be their introduction to that issue. I don't want to give someone in their formative years something that shows these issues in the light that it does. So let's go into swings and misses and talk about this with some more detail that makes a little more sense. So some superficial swings and misses would be so many metaphors, like so many metaphors. My sister read the first half of the book. She physically read. I always listen to the audiobook. Another swing and a hit would be the audiobook narrator does a very good job. There's a character who's from Georgia and has a Georgian accent, and I really hate the accent that she uses for that. But that's not really her fault, and she did a really good job with the book in general. I would happily read other things that she's narrated. She was lovely. Anyway, back to swings and misses. Oh shoot, what was I saying about swings and misses? Oh, right, so many metaphors. So my little sister, Tess, my younger sister, she's not little, she's like 26. my little sister, Tess, she read it physically, and when I mentioned oh my God, there are so many metaphors, she was like, there was at least once where there were 3 metaphors in one paragraph. There's just so many. And so many insanely fancy words used very casually by the main character they took me out of the story myself. I don't know if this is just part of dark academia, if this is just how they are. Maybe they are, and I'm unaware. Ugh. Then I'll never read dark academia again because I could not stand the vocabulary she used. There were times where it was, I don't know if they did, maybe they just have a much bigger vocabulary than I do, but it felt a lot like they wanted to say a normal sentence and they grabbed a thesaurus and they found a different word for angry and they put in that word instead that no one's ever heard of before. There's a part where like two girls are working on a project on the, like in a room. And so they've got like snacks, they've got like coffee cups, they've got their stuff everywhere. And when she says like, oh, we picked up our things and went upstairs, she says like, I picked up our this and this and this and our other detritus and went upstairs. And I'm just like, detritus? Seriously? Like, I know what that word means, but anyway, that's one example, but it happens all over the place and it's extremely frustrating. It's things like that that were like this like characterization that was in the writing that I didn't like. I don't think that means it was written badly. I just didn't like it. So it's a swing and a miss for me. Another big swing and a miss for me. When it comes to alcohol, I like pretty much all types of alcohol, but I really like scotch and whiskey and that kind of thing. Bourbon, I love a Manhattan, which is made with bourbon, adore it. That's my favorite. I pretty much always get, like, my default is to get a Manhattan. So, this character is super into bourbon. They're in high school, they're 17, but she's super into bourbon. The other girls will drink it to be cool like her. That in itself is fine. That's a very young person way that you go about living your life. That makes sense to me. But they kept describing how bourbon tastes, or whiskey. And because they were talking about how like the girls were drinking it, but they didn't like it. So there's that. Now, also, another thing that was very frustrating is that one of the characters, the celebrity in this book written by an author, is an author. She's so cool because she's an author. She won the Pulitzer Prize, so she is a cool author. She is constantly talking about how she's a method writer. I'm a method writer. And so I got myself arrested when I was 16 so that I could know what it's like to be arrested. And I needed to know what an old-fashioned tastes like. So I bought a like distillery and learned all about whiskey. It's incredibly annoying. Like, being a method actor is one thing. It's also annoying. But being a method writer, the entire point of being a writer is that you have a good imagination and you're good at writing stories and you can make up interesting things. This person's imagination, research capabilities, interviewing capabilities are so poor, they have to do all the things before they can write about it? What? It was so annoying, and she kept doing the most pretentious, annoying things because she's a method writer, and she would bring it up all the time. You guys know I'm a method writer. Don't question the weird thing I'm doing. I hated that. So I think it's very annoying to be a method writer. Don't be a method writer. Like, just write, just imagine things, interview people, do lots of research, but don't be a method writer, you know? Don't do that. However, this author kept describing the taste of bourbon incorrectly. And I know, because I drink it constantly. They kept describing it as being bitter. Bourbon and whiskey are not, and scotch, are not bitter. And if a high school girl was drinking it to be cool, the primary note that they would get on the palate would be like a burning sensation. That's what whiskey tastes like. Whiskey's burny. Bourbon, scotch, whiskey, they're all the same. Hot tip if you haven't tried those. They're basically all the same. Bourbon is actually a sweeter version it's sweeter than most, but not all scotches and whiskeys. But generally, if you're just getting kind of any whiskey or any scotch or any bourbon's gonna be the sweetest. it was described as bitter more than once. It was described once as tasting like gasoline, which I think would taste bitter. I haven't had gasoline, but it wouldn't, that's not what bourbon would taste like, and it's not what whiskey or scotch would taste like. It would taste burny or really like way too smoky. It tastes like leather. That's another thing it can taste like, is leather. Probably not bourbon, but like scotch or whiskey might taste like leather. So I was very frustrated that there is this method writer in this book, but the author of this real life book wasn't a method writer enough to try the alcohol they keep describing incorrectly. What, should you try a sip of bourbon before you describe it? I think actually what might have happened is that the author tried a Manhattan and it was bitter. And then they were like, oh, well, bourbon is bitter. I think because a Manhattan is a bourbon-based drink that does have bitters in it, and if it's not made, it can taste bitter. If you haven't had it much, that might be the thing that stands out to you. Sometimes when I take my first sip of a Manhattan, I'm like, this tastes weirdly bitter. Why does it taste so bitter? And it's usually just because it hasn't been made or mixed or whatever correctly, because there are bitters in it. But there are bitters in it because the alcohol itself isn't bitter. That's why you put the bitters in. And Manhattans are really sweet, so it was just weird. That was weird. Be a method writer enough that you try the alcohol that you're talking about. Don't, like, anyway. But don't make your main character, or one of your main characters, a method writer. It's annoying. So, those are sort of superficial reasons why I didn't enjoy this book. I didn't enjoy the twists. I felt they were very unearned, especially at the end of the book. It's like the main character turns into a completely different person at the end of the book. It doesn't make any sense. The things that she does go against everything that she's been saying, like all of her motivations and kind of moral standing for the entire book, and then she just does a completely different thing. I think it's supposed to be a twist of like, ooh, you had no idea this is who she really was the whole time, but it like didn't work at all. That's how I feel about most of this book. Most of this book I feel was like really good ideas that were executed really badly. It also feels like this book had several drafts with several different like things going, several different versions of it, but they didn't go back through to make sure that all of it lines up, that the changes they made from draft to draft still all work together. So that was weird. Anyway, so those are all more superficial reasons why I didn't like the book. I think I would recommend it to people who hear the ideas and think they would like them. Maybe people who do enjoy reading YA, or who aren't really that bothered by writing style, or are less picky about it than I am, which is admittedly very picky. Yeah, I think if it sounds like it would float your boat, totally give it a try. I would say if you're not really liking it a quarter or a third of the way through, you don't need to finish it because it's only gonna get worse. It does not get better. The story questions that are asked are answered in really dumb ways. Every time tension is built up, it is immediately resolved and cut down, and then there's no more tension left. It happens throughout the book in many ways, where like there will be a big reveal that is completely resolved in the conversation in which it is revealed. What's the point of that? Here are the reasons I would not recommend this book to anybody, particularly to its target audience. I wouldn't say I wouldn't recommend it to anybody. If you're an adult who is well-adjusted and like wouldn't care about this kind of thing, then you're fine. You do what you want. Warning, here we are going to talk about several hot button issues, several things that may not be helpful for you to hear discussed. We're gonna talk about eating disorders. We're gonna talk about suicide and suicide ideation and attempts. We're gonna talk about mental health, therapy, and medication for things like mental health. So if you're not in a place right now where that's something that you think would be helpful for you too, or that you just don't really want to engage with, time code's down below. You can skip right over that. So This book goes out of its way to address several mental health issues that are very prevalent in children and teens. And it does so in a very mean way. The main character is supposed to be an unreliable narrator, but that's not super obvious at the beginning. And even when a main character is an unreliable narrator, I don't think it is a good idea. I think it's a very foolish and bad idea to have them mock people with mental health issues or entire topics of mental health issues and make your character cooler than that. I don't think that's good. I don't think you should do that. I'm very surprised that this was published. I am extremely surprised and disappointed that it was published as YA specifically. So basically, the main character is shown as being like really cool. Well, she's shown as being really smart and kind of like cooler than the girls who try too hard. She doesn't try too hard to like be as much of a hipster as the other girls are doing to impress this author character who's come to their school. The other girls are like, oh, we don't use cell phones because like technology is the death of the written word or whatever. Not that exactly, but they're like, we don't use cell phones. And she's like, that's ridiculous. Okay. And you know, they're drinking the alcohol that she likes because she says it's cool. And they're like, yeah, I think it's cool too. And the main character is rightfully thinks that's dumb. She is really smart, really book smart, and really well read. I think if I met her in real life, I'd be like, that's the most pretentious 18-year-old I've ever met in my whole life, and I never want to spend time with her. But she's surrounded by so much more pretentious kids that it's like a little better. So the year before this story starts, she had her best friend died, and like she was there. She like saw it happen. She ends up spending some time in like a mental institution. I don't like calling it a mental institution, in a hospital. She talks about the therapy and the doctor as like, they thought they could talk to me and that would make things better, but of course it didn't. Right. Like I would be benefited by these not smart people talking to me. And same with her medication. She, for a lot of the book, is off of her medication because like, medication, I don't need that. And it's never really addressed like that again. It's very much that is the tone and the approach that this book and this main character have towards therapy and medication, and I hated that. It's not really dwelt on, but it is a thing that's going on the whole time. She's not on her medication, and you're watching her kind of get more and more unhinged. And there's a way to do that that is a commentary on like, see, you should totally be on your medication, but this book doesn't really take that approach. I don't count that against the author, because I think it might have just been not pulled off very well. I think that maybe it was supposed to be a commentary on how important medication is and how important like that help is and all of that, but that did not come through the writing when I read it, which again, I don't think there was malintent there necessarily. But then there's a scene where she goes into town to go shopping because she's been dealing with like all of this mental unrest from the trauma she experienced the year before. And so now her clothes don't fit because she's lost so much weight. It's just so funny how a female character, or a male character, but how a female character in a book never gets depressed and gains weight. They get depressed and they lose weight. That's what happens. So her clothes aren't fitting anymore because she's like skin and bone because she's lost weight, which is bad. That's a disordered relationship with food and with eating. There is a scene where she goes to town to get more clothes and another girl goes with her. And that girl, we've already kind of laughed at and dismissed her in the internal monologue of our main character because she's very much a follower. In this scene, they go clothes shopping and she is in a sweater that doesn't accentuate her very thin middle, and talks about how it's not flattering on her. And the main character describes how, like, oh, this reminds her of her old roommate who used to measure her wrist with her fingers, and who never, like, only ever ate dry, I don't remember, but it goes on a thing explaining very specific eating disorder behavior in her old roommate. How, like, I've lost weight, but I'm not like these two girls. The reason they're losing weight is because they want to be skinny, and I'm not losing weight because I want to be skinny or because I want to be popular. I'm just losing weight because, like, I'm depressed or something like that. It's an insane scene to have in a book, especially a book that is being marketed and sold to teen children who deal with eating disorders like mad. I'm shocked. I'm shocked that this was put in this book in this way and then published as a YA book. It shouldn't have been published in any book. I cannot believe it was published for teenagers. Your character is so cool that she thinks characters with an eating disorder are stupid. She doesn't have enough empathy to be like, they're going through something as hard as I'm going through, because look at this, we're both having to buy new clothes because we're too skinny for the clothes we own. Clearly, it made me very mad. It still makes me very mad. It was such a irresponsible thing to write when the hero of your story is derisive about a teenage girl with an eating disorder. Two of them, who she lived with. I hate it. And to have her perspective be, people who have eating disorders, it's just because they want to be popular. That's the reason. Ugh, disgusting. That is not the reason. So I hated that. That's a big swing and a miss. Then, and this might be a worse swing and a miss. No, they're equal. Equal swings and misses here. Then there's a scene where there's this one character in the book who is portrayed very much like Colin from the Harry Potter books, the little kid who he and his brother are just obsessed with Harry and, like, super fans of him and, like, go around taking his picture all the time. Colin Creevey, I think. And they just love him so much. They love Harry. And she's portrayed like that, of this little hanger-on who's completely starstruck by the celebrity writer. I think she's also like 15 or 16, but she's this little kind girl. Her name's Hannah, and the main character hates her so much, and it makes no sense. I do not know why she hates her so much, but she does. And she assumes people are pitying her all the time, so Hannah comes up to her and is like, hey, after being very nice to her in several other scenes, and she's a jerk, but she's like, hey, so warning, we're gonna talk about suicide and suicide ideation and suicide attempts. Yeah, absolutely scoot on forward if this isn't your deal, or if this isn't good for you, or if you just don't want to hear about it. So she says, hey, last year my sister attempted suicide, and I've heard the rumors about you, and I just wanted to let you know that I'm here to talk to you if you would like to talk about it. That's all. The main character responds to this by looking at her and saying, I'm not suicidal. And I don't remember how Hannah reacts, because I was so mad at the main character, because at this point, all the other things I've talked about had already happened. She had already maligned therapy, medication, girls with eating disorders different from her disordered eating habits. And now someone who went through something as incredibly difficult as their sister attempting suicide says like, hey, I'm a safe place that you can talk if you need to. And her response is to be offended that someone thought she was suicidal. And then I'm pretty sure, I'm not positive about this, but I think the next line is that she had in fact slit her wrist the year before. So she had attempted suicide. Like, the rumors were true. And she was so angry at this kind girl. This girl shows up later and she is this mean to her every single time, and every time she's just nice. It's ridiculous. It's so cruel. And suicidal ideation, suicidal thoughts, attempting to complete suicide, these are heartbreakingly common things for young adults, and for teenagers, for children. This happens a lot. And to be reading a book about a cool person who's been through hard things and have them be disgusted to be thought of as similar to you, to be after being similar to you. I don't know what the attempt was here with this one. I don't know why she was so upset. I don't know why the author wrote her to be that upset. There's never a moment, she's not, if she had that reaction and then like left and was like, I wish I hadn't reacted that way, or like deep down I know that she was just trying to be nice, and I am not in a place where I can like accept this, or anything, any thought. There's no thought, there's no going back to it at all. There is no thought about how she reacted to this very kind girl at all. You don't have to write a perfect character. I don't think you need to write a perfect character. I think this character could have had all of these reactions to all of these things, and you can absolutely write it in a way where it's her dealing with the fact that she does relate to these things and she's not comfortable with that. But that is not how it's portrayed. That's not how she's portrayed. It's done so badly. It could have been done really well. I also feel like that's still a lot to put in one book, to specifically address suicide, eating disorders, therapy, and medication. That's a lot. But to approach all of those as I'm so smart, this is dumb, or I'm so intellectual and erudite that this cannot help me, I'm smarter than the help this could provide. And to never have not even have her kind of have a come to Jesus moment and realize like, oh man, I've been ignoring this, and what I really need to do is accept the help around me and accept these other ways that I can be helped. Never to have that is just, then it's just there. Yeah. So I had a lot of thoughts. A lot of thoughts of adolescent and vengeance. Overall, is it worth a dyslexic read? Well, I listened to it. I didn't actually read it. I would say if you are an adult and you were, or even if you are younger and you can read something with these themes that I've talked about, the kind of trigger warning themes there, and be fine with that, and you don't feel like it would put you in a bad place, and you like the sound, like the ideas of it, and you're not too picky about writing style, I say totally give it a try. I don't think it's nothing that you would need to stick through if it's not really floating your boat. But I also wouldn't say no one should read this ever. I think a lot of it just wasn't my cup of tea, and then there were some serious things that I really didn't like and don't feel I want to support. But I wouldn't say that, like, if it sounds like it's right up your alley, it might be right up your alley. Give it a go. Go brave the world of the written word. It feels to me to be rather, my neighbors are walking by and my cat is in the window and there's a sign that I made that says like, "Hi, my name is Siggy, I'm an emotional support cat." And they stopped to read the sign and they're checking out my cat. It made me very happy. Okay, they're gone now. Also, my windows are incredibly thin and everyone could hear anything I'm saying while I'm sitting here filming. So